Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to introduce Wes Oswin. Wes Oswin is heading an exceptionally important part of the introduction to the national system, which is the implementation of safety management systems. Comes from a very strong maritime background. He's Victorian, so if you do ask questions, you know, gently and slow. But we're very, very lucky to have him. He's been over in Port Lincoln, presented a workshop to the fishing industry on safety management systems. And I think across the spectrum of the activities of the Institute, you'll find what he has to say very, very interesting. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Wes Oswin.
Thanks everyone. It's a pretty hard presentation to follow, that one. It's a good thing my wife's not here. I'd be in a lot of trouble. Look, thanks for having me here at your conference. It's a pleasure. In my presentation today, I'm essentially going to cover 4 areas. One is to give you a bit of an overview of the legislative framework that covers operations and safety management systems in the national system. I'm also going to talk about what are some of the current problems that we have around the country when we talk about SMS and compliance with Part E. I'm going to talk to you about what AMSA's approach to that is. And then I'm going to also talk about what we think might be the future role of accredited and attested surveyors in SMS in the national system. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the flavour, and I apologise if some of this has already been presented in your conference, but obviously at the very top we have the Act that sits at the very top of the national system. So under that we have regulations, and importantly we have Marine Order 504. Now the importance of that is that Marine Order 504 puts in place some of the important trigger dates that brings about compliance with the National Standard for Commercial Vessels, Part E operations. And obviously those standards then sit under Marine Order 504. So when it comes to those standards, and many of you would be familiar with this, NSCV Part E operations, it specifies the minimum requirements for the safe operation of domestic commercial vessels in Australia. And Part F, particularly F2, it specifies the construction, equipment and operational standards for leisure craft, hire and drive, and so you'd be familiar with that. And F2 is currently in review and will be updated in the not too distant future. There's some important prescriptive SMS requirements that are in F2 that apply to those particular service categories. Where can you find those copies of those standards? As many of you would be familiar, if you go to the Standards and Legislation section of our website, you'll be able to click on that link, and all of those standards, and indeed the Act, the regulations, the marine orders, any exemptions that we currently have can all be downloaded from that particular section of our website. Part E prescribes these requirements that need to be met in Part E, determined by the particular service category, the highest common denominator service category of a vessel that might be in an operation. So if you're a Class 1 passenger vessel operation, you're expected, once you get past one of our trigger dates, to be able to demonstrate you're complying with all full 12 elements. And it's an important point I just want to make is that when it comes to compliance with these, for AMSA, it's not about the paperwork. What we're ultimately interested in is that the operation can demonstrate that they're complying with these. And we'll talk a bit more. That's one of the problems that we currently have in the national system. The national system also has some important safety duty obligations as well. And this was a big change. Victoria introduced this a number of years ago. The national system has also adopted it. And that is that these important safety duty obligations apply pretty much at all levels now within an operation. So importantly, there's a duty of owners to implement and maintain a safety management system that manages risk to a level so low as reasonably practicable. There's a duty of masters to implement and comply with the safety management system that's been established by the owner. There's also a duty that's not on this slide of crew, and believe it or not, even passengers. And AMSA takes these safety duty obligations very seriously. We have more breaches and more fines issued as a result of these provisions than anything else in the national system. We've had a couple of cases now where even passengers have jumped off river cats up in Queensland. Now, a particular guy in question was silly enough to video himself doing it. The police were able to catch up with him, and we sent him a fine for $2,500 for his trouble. You can imagine, in the night, the impact that would have had on the master and crew of that vessel, working out where this guy's going on. Is he drowned? Is he out there floundering in the water? So yeah, we take these things pretty seriously. But that's not to say that our overall compliance and enforcement strategy is to, wherever possible, where there's a willingness of industry to get compliant, then our compliance and enforcement policies that will assist them to get compliant. That doesn't mean that we won't take pretty decisive action where people thumb their noses at us, or where they're criminally negligent or whatever. We certainly take that action as well. But overarchingly, we want to help industry get compliant with this stuff, because we're talking about trying to fundamentally implement a positive safety culture in maritime. Now, some levels and sectors of our industry do that very well now, but a lot of sectors don't, and we've got a long way to go in that respect. And it's a long-term vision of AMSA to get there. So, in terms of some of the important trigger and compliance dates, so through Marine Order 504 and our regulations, it basically works like this. So existing Class 1 and Class 4 operations are expected to comply with these respective standards by 1 July this year. Existing Class 2 and 3 operations by 1 July 2016. And all newly constructed operations that commence are actually expected to comply when they begin operations. And importantly, state and territory requirements that exist the national system continue to apply as well. And that's one of our problems. So, for example, in Victoria, all operations were expected to comply with Part E a number of years ago. Similarly, in Queensland, they've had safety management systems, some of you would be aware, for about 10 years. But some states hadn't applied it at all. And that's created some problems for us as well. So when the national system commenced, we sort of had to mesh together 7 different requirements. And what we seek to do is, by 1 July 2016, all operations are expected to be at the same standard. So what are some of the problems? Well, in those previous implementations, some states, including my own, they'd attempted to implement SMS into their fleets. And well-intentioned, many of them might have been, they gave industry things like templates that industry was expected to modify to suit their operations. Now, of course, what happened, people in my family were guilty of this as well, is that they changed perhaps the name of the vessel on the front cover, and perhaps the unique ID, but the rest of the safety management system was the same template that was provided. Now, well, they found something on the net, because the regulator's approach was all about the paperwork. It wasn't about whether the risks associated with the operation had been identified and managed appropriately. And those problems continue to plague us now in a lot of those states that had those pre-existing requirements. Not all. Some sectors, as I've said, in the industry did a very good job and have implemented good safety management systems. But there is a serious problem out there at the moment that we actually sort of have to roll back. Risk assessments, as I said, were often overlooked. We're going to talk about that a bit more on the next slide. Key hazards and risks were often missed. And more importantly and fundamentally, owners and crew didn't know what was expected of them. They didn't know what a safety management system was, or how to put together one that actually related to their operation. In many cases, they were simply handed a folder of paperwork, and they thought that that was what the regulator's expectations were. They didn't know where to start. So if we just focus on risk assessments for a moment, you know, it's quite obvious when you think about it, but how can you seek to implement a safety management system for your operation if you don't identify the hazards and risks associated with it? It's pretty, it would seem to be common sense, wouldn't it? But believe it or not, a lot of states, including my home state of Victoria in the early 90s, didn't expect owners to do a risk assessment. And so, of course, you know, key risks associated with the operations were missed. You know, there was standard operating procedures for the big ones, and these are typically, you know, what you see in safety management systems. You know, perhaps man overboard, fire, capsize, flood. All of those common ones that we learn when we go to maritime training schools and so on, you know, were there and identified. Not necessarily managed appropriately, but some of the key risks associated with those particular operations were generally missed. If you're a fishing trawler, the risks and hazards associated with the trawl winch were missed. If you're a small operator on a dory, the risks associated with falling overboard weren't managed appropriately. So as a result, you know, today in the national system, we have a number of serious incidents and fatalities that are preventable. And in most of those cases, it's because the risks haven't been managed appropriately. So, what's AMSA's program? Well, we've tried to bring it back to basics. One of our key focuses is to try and demystify the buzzword. Demystify what a safety management system is, what its benefits are, how to go about it, and to encourage owners, you know, to do it themselves. By all means, they can pull in assistance if they require, but we're trying to discourage the reliance on shore-based consultants. It's not to say that there's not good consultants out there that have maritime experience, and where that does exist, we'd encourage people to do that. But we've seen a lot of safety management systems that have been produced by people that aren't familiar with the maritime sector, that identify all sorts of interesting hazards like terrorism and needle stick injuries and all sorts of things, but the SMS doesn't cover the risks associated with that vessel or that operation. So we're trying to keep it simple. We are encouraging owners to start with identifying the key risks, putting in place effective control measures for those, and then implementing it. You know, for them to understand the benefits and how to do it in a practical but simple way. So we're trying to get, you know, ultimately to build the capacity of the industry to get compliant. If I just say, you know, just reinforce, full compliance with NSCV Part E is going to take a significant amount of time. You know, even in Victoria, where, you know, Class 1 passenger operations there have been expected to comply with the old Part E since about 1990. Even today, they're struggling with compliance. So there's a long way to go. It's going to take significant time, and everyone here, you know, can play a role in help changing that safety culture. We're going to talk about that a bit more in the later parts of the presentation. So some of AMSA's programs currently, we've been running a series of practical hands-on workshops with industry. Only yesterday I was in Port Lincoln where we had about 30 fishing operators attend. And in these workshops, we get them in groups and we take them through those practical steps to identify risk and manage that effectively. We have a range of sample safety management system documents available on our website for download. Now, they're not templates. What they are is they're PDFs, and they have material in there that owners we're encouraging to use as a guide to develop their own safety management system. Sure, if they wanted to, they could copy something out, you know, out of there if they really got creative. But we're not encouraging the use of templates per se. We've also developed a safety management workshop resource kit. We've done that in conjunction with the Australian Maritime College. And that's now an AMC. I think, and Ian's here today. It was only last week I was at the Australian Maritime College in Tasmania, where Ian was delivering this exact workshop to Master Less Than 35 course. So they've embedded that in all of their debt qualifications now in the coastal, which is fantastic. We've also got additional tools, a guideline, to comply with Part E, risk assessment guides and things like that that are also available to download from our website. We're also, in the not too distant future, looking at a series of videos and perhaps some online training that can support some of these principles as well. In fact, I had a very productive meeting with Bob Miller from the Australian Fisheries and Maritime Academy about doing some of that work in conjunction with us. So that's AMSA's approach. It's trying to build industry's capacity to understand what this is about and for them to go away and implement something that's unique to their operation. And in doing that, we believe then there's a much better chance that the safety management system will be implemented. Now, all too often, or if you look around the country, these things have become about the paperwork. They're collecting dust in wheelhouses. They're there to hand across the rail to a marine safety inspector to flick through the paperwork, but they're not actively managing the safety on board the vessel. So where can you find some of this information? If you go to AMSA's website, if you click on Vessel and Operations, go to the Operations section, all of our material is being uploaded to that part of our website. So I encourage you to have a look at that. We also now have, as a part of our SMS Workshops, we've got a good participant pack too that gives them some assistance with complying with Part E. So we've done about 30 of those workshops now around the country, and we're going to continue to roll them out over the course of the next 12 months. If there's one in your area, I'd encourage you to come along and attend. We did about 20 in Queensland last year. We've got some more coming up in Victoria in the next coming months. Between now and Christmas, we'll be doing a series through Western Australia. So if you hear of them, I'd encourage you to come along, because not only might you pick up some information that's useful for you to use in your work, but you can also help assist in the session. We try to team up in these workshops, to have some industry experience from the regulator side there as well, to assist the discussions of the tables. So, for example, this is actually a photograph of a workshop that was run in Queensland. But this particular one, we had about 90 owners present in the room. And what we do is we group them in similar service categories and on tables, so that the discussions then get context. But what they basically do is they'll work through identifying the hazards and risks in their operations, and then through the workshop then we look to then seek to manage those and implement effective controls that they can then go away and develop into their SMS. And I have to say, the feedback from these workshops has been quite amazing. It's been beyond our wildest expectations, really. So just to carry on from that, these two photos that are at the bottom of this slide are actually a part of the practical components of the day. It's not just me or another facilitator up there spruiking. We get the attendees to actually identify some of the hazards and risks associated with these pieces of deck equipment, and that then forms the basis of managing the risks from there.
Excuse me, just a question.
Yeah.
Operating a lot of equipment on there, do they have SOPs in place for that?
Would they?
Yes.
No, and often in many cases, believe it or not, they don't. And that's the point, is to identify, they'll start by saying, okay, well, what are the risks associated with the trawl winch? And they pick those up very quickly. The next part of the discussion is, well, okay, how are we going to control those risks? It might be they need a standard operating procedure. And then we actually get them to jot that down in a practical sense, what that procedure might look like.
Well, it's probably one of the safest ways. I think you can have a person or someone off on it as well.
Yeah.
Their understanding and knowing of
Yeah.
consequences.
Yeah.
If they deviate from that,
Yeah, absolutely. So that goes on, they'll identify often that they do need a standard operating procedure for this. And they do need then to have a training and induction program for who's going to operate it. And the discussions that go on, then it starts to then, they can see the pathway of what a safety management system actually is.
But it makes it safer for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about videos, they're the sort of things that we hope then we might put into a video or an online format that can help people understand the concepts. And this is the basic, one of the basic flow charts taken from the workshop. Hazard identification, risk assessment, implement controls, turn that into a safety management system. So this is a flow chart that we use in those workshops, and it seems to be striking a real chord with industry because it practically demystifies it. So this is the process that we take them through in the workshop: hazard and risk assessment. Identify your hazards associated with your vessel, the nature of the vessel's work or your business activities, where you operate, the passengers or the crew that you have on board. Control those risks by eliminating them if you can, if not minimising them. Building your safety management system document, generally through operating procedures, emergency plans, crew training, numbers associated, implement your safety management system. One of the big problems is people get to this stage, but then never actually implement it. So implement it and review it, and kind of then, hey presto, without even knowing it, you've got a safety management system. One of the other things that we get them to do, and look, a lot of our delegates said to me, Wes, this is going to be a step too far. For industry to try and put this into a risk register and understand risk management, we've tried it, it's going to fall flat. Can I say, in all of the workshops that I've run, not once have I come up with even the most tattooed fisherman, that left that perhaps left school at year 8. They can all get this stuff, and they do get it in the way that we're rolling it out. So we teach them how to put it into a basic risk register. This is obviously one of the more complex ones, but we have other versions that they can use as well. Ultimately, we don't really care if they write it down on the back of an envelope, providing they've done a risk assessment and then they're managing those risks and they can demonstrate that they're doing that. We're in a good place. So that gets me to the point, I guess, of perhaps what we're here today for, and that's what does AMSA see as the role of marine surveyors in this aspect of what we do. And I think it comes down to three different things. One is to help educate industry, one is to facilitate industry getting there, and the other is to help AMSA assess where industry's at. So in terms of education, we'd love to be out in wharves and slipways every day. The practical way though, AMSA simply can't be. So, you people are out there. You're in the face of owners and operators every day. So surveyors are ideally placed to help achieve that safety culture and to assist owners with understanding what their obligations are and how to get there. So you can certainly provide that guidance and assistance. An important point is that AMSA at this point doesn't expect marine surveyors to be SMS auditors. AMSA is still grappling with what that's going to mean in the national system, how we're going to do that, and I'll talk about that on one of the next slides. But certainly we think surveyors do have an important role to play. So what might that be? Firstly, we think that surveyors can help us perform a basic SMS verification role. Not audit. We certainly think that surveyors can help be an intelligence gathering medium for AMSA. And what I mean by that is, Adam and I, we've developed a paper that's going to go to the Marine Agencies forums shortly to try and get agreement that perhaps marine surveyors can help us gather information about the extent of the implementation of an SMS for a particular operation. So, for example, AMSA can then use that information to see how SMS and Part E is being, the extent that it's being taken up by industry across the national fleet, to help us inform the targeting of higher level SMS audits, and even to inform the targeting of compliance and enforcement action as well. And of course, it's also important in terms of our more flexible approach to survey schedules. How an owner or operator is going in terms of their SMS is often could be a lead indicator of whether they're actually maintaining the vessel fit for purpose as well. So what might that level of assessment look like? So, for example, it might be that a surveyor could assess in a basic way whether the vessel is actually covered by a safety management system. Clearly, if one didn't exist, that would be a flag for AMSA that we need to do something about it. Now, there might be a willingness of the owner to do something there and get compliant, but they simply don't know how to do it. So that might mean we need to give them some more educational resources. But it might also be that the owner doesn't have a willingness to get compliant. He's thumbing his nose at the national system, and we need to take a harder line about that. Obviously, do the key risks for the operation appear to be identified and managed? We'd want to know about that. Does the implementation SMS appear to be implemented? It's not much good if the document might be there and it's no one knows anything about it. It's collecting dust. It's not relevant to the operation. Well, that's not a safety management system. What's the level of understanding of who you're dealing with about the vessel? Is the SMS integrated with that? And I guess importantly, this is another area I think where surveyors can play a really unique role, and that's in terms of the regular inspection and maintenance program for the vessel. This is a requirement under Part E, so owners do have to implement a regular system of inspection and maintenance. And there's the reference to it in Part E. This is an extract that's just taken from one of our sample hire and drive SMSs that are on our website. But a marine surveyor, I think, is ideally placed to help owners implement some sort of system of program maintenance that's relevant to their particular vessel. Particularly, given that we're going to move into a system where survey schedules are more, perhaps more flexible. It's obviously going to be crucial, that owners, are making sure that their vessels are fit for purpose every day they put to sea, not just the day before you guys come down to do an assessment, a survey. So, in terms of SMS auditing, this is a program that AMSA currently has as a part of our National System Transition Program. So there's work that's commencing in Canberra to develop what our national SMS auditing framework is going to be. At this stage, we see that will be separate to the surveyor verification process, but what might be a surveyor verification might be complementary to that as well. It's likely that our overarching SMS audit will be based on a risk-based evaluation. So, for example, it might be that we do use surveyor deficiency data, or near misses and accidents, intelligence, or even where we think we need to focus on industry as a sector to inform how we target those SMS audits. And there likely to be performance-based assessments as well. So not just a tick and flick as to whether the paperwork looks like it complies with Part E. Our audits will likely be a performance-based assessment of whether that SMS has actually been implemented, whether the owner and crew are actually doing what they said they do in the SMS. And I've been involved with a number of these over the years, and it's even the most robust SMS, from a paperwork point of view, often when break down the cover of it, there's just a load of rats running around the back. It's there to just keep the surveyor, keep the regulator at bay, and obviously that even with fairly large global companies. So yeah, we intend to be able to drill into these down the track to make sure that they're doing what we want them to do, which is to manage risk associated with their operations. So that brings me to the end of the little presentation. I want to allow some time for questions.
You've covered everything, Wes. Is that your boat?
No, that's not my boat. That's a boat that belongs to Ross Ferry at Apollo Bay. Interesting story with this one. They built that at Marengo. It's built out of it was built out of green hardwood. Yeah, logged in Gippsland, and the guy that runs it's been doing it for 47 years.
David,
Yeah.
some of the fishing fraternity, aren't real skilled with music.
Yeah.
They have a real,
Yeah.
help the person, they have a real problem about getting off
Yeah.
the starting line.
Yeah.
You probably hate to hear this, but if they've destroyed their old SMS,
Yeah.
we've still got a few old MSQ ones.
Yeah.
And that's what's starting with the starting base.
Yeah.
I think they need some sort of basic templates to start with.
Yeah.
If they start from nothing and build themselves,
Yeah.
they're either go to Billy Bob's auditing services that'll just print one out and send it to them.
Yeah. Oh, look, if there's something there that works for them, look, we've actually run a number of workshops in Queensland just focused on some of those low-level operators, and we do really, I don't like to use the word, but we kind of dumb it down to a lower level. But yeah, I mean, your assistance and advice with that's absolute gold, because it's quite right, they do need to get something to get out of the starter blocks. And look, if there's something from that was put together by a state or territory before the national system's going to work, fantastic.
I know there's problems with all the generic, especially the procedures, so they need 6 crew or something, they need 2 or more.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to it. Instead of handing them,
Yeah. Yeah, look, if there's material that's relevant, this is the thing with us, we don't want to be about paperwork, but if there's how they get there to ultimately just manage the risks about their operation. If we can get them to grapple with that and do it properly, we're in a better place. It was interesting yesterday at Lincoln. There was 2 guys there that ran tiers, doing scale fish, I think long liners or hand liners or something like that. They had their wives with them. And after going through the process, I think they're about to get inflatable PFDs and PLBs for Father's Day. Because they realised that they weren't managing, because they're one-man operations in aluminium boats. They realised they weren't managing the risk amount overall. The coastal life jacket sitting up the front, and the E-curve might have been somewhere that was not going to be of use to them if they fell overboard. So it was a really good outcome of the day. But no, whatever works.
Well, good. We're going to have a bit of a forum at the end, so if there are any questions for any of the speakers that are still here, we'll obviously, I'm sure Wes will make himself available. Can I, first of all, give him the go away gift from Megan?